Everyone thought an 8-foot wall of cedar planks could erase 60 years of history. They didn't see the sweat my grandfather poured into that road, or the calluses he carried to his grave. They didn't hear the sound of my father's boots crunching that gravel before sunrise, or smell the diesel fumes that lingered after every cattle haul. They saw land they wanted, and a man they thought they could push off it. I was halfway home from the Abilene cattle auction, 30 head of prime black Angus behind me, when I rounded the bend and slammed my boot on the brake. My old F-250 groaned to a stop, coffee sloshing in the cup that's been welded to the dashboard since the Reagan years. And there it was, a brand new fence stretching across Cottonwood Creek, rode like a wooden middle finger. The smell of fresh-cut lumber hit me first. Then the sign, Private ROAD Willowbrook, Estates Residents Only. Behind it stood Vivian Blackwood, HOA, president and self-appointed queen of the subdivision that had sprouted like weeds at the end of our dead-end road. Pearl-white BMW parked, neatly behind her, clipboard in hand, smile sharp enough to draw blood. 2 of her board members hovered at her side, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Security improvement, she called out, like she was announcing a prize. You'll need alternative property access. I stepped down from my truck, boots grinding into the dirt my grandfather hauled in 1962. My hands curled into fists without me meaning to. This is my family's road, Vivian, built with my grandfather's sweat. Was your road, she corrected, eyes flashing. Democracy in action. That's when I knew this wasn't ending over coffee and sweet tea. This was a fight, and she'd just made the first mistake of her life. I drove straight past the ranch and into town, parking in front of Garrett Mill's office. Garrett's been my friend since high school, and the best property lawyer in 3 counties. His place smelled like leather-bound law books and quiet confidence. Ezra, he said, grinning before I'd even finished explaining. They screwed up royally. He spread a yellowed document across the desk. The original 1962 easement agreement, signed in faded ink. Your family's got perpetual and exclusive access. Runs with the land. Once you've got it, it's like he smirked. Herpes never goes away. He fired off a cis before I'd finished my coffee. 48 hours to remove the fence or face legal action. But Vivian didn't get to be queen of the cul-de-sac by backing down. Her Dallas lawyer shot back with a counterclaim, saying the easement had expired due to Nanias, and that my cattle operation was commercial traffic incompatible with residential standards. They even offered me a compromise. A daily access permit for $25, requested 72 hours in advance. I laughed so hard it scared the barn cats. Over my dead body, I told Sarah that night. She just smiled, slid a business card across the table, and said, "Call Rodriguez at County Planning. He'll want to see this." One anonymous tip later, Inspector Rodriguez rolled up to Will Gates, county badge on his shirt, and a stop-work order in his hand. "Ma'am," he told Vivian, "this fence violates county setbacks and blocks an established easement." Her smile cracked, just a hair. I wish I could say that was the end of it. But suburban predators don't back down when they smell blood, even if it's their own. The next HOA meeting turned into a war council. Their solution? Build a second fence right on the property line. That Saturday, the ranching community decided they'd had enough. By sunrise, 23 pickups were lined up along County Road 47, diesel engines rumbling like distant thunder. At precisely 6:15 a.m., we rolled past Willowbrook in a symphony of air horns that rattled their windows. Vivian called the sheriff, screaming about noise terrorism. Sheriff Patterson just chuckled. "Ma'am, honking isn't illegal. Maybe invest in some better windows." The next day, my cattle took their own exercise drive right past their backyard barbecues, dust and fresh manure drifting into their perfectly staged outdoor kitchens. Vivian's Pearl BMW got a new coat of honest Texas dirt, but that was just the warm-up. The real war hadn't even begun. Vivian thought she could outspend me into submission. What she didn't know was that ranchers don't scare easy, and we've got longer patience than drought. Within a week, Willowbrook's HOA had hired private security, $8 a month for traffic monitoring and community safety, in plain English, paid harassment. 2 guards in pressed uniforms parked just inside their gates, cameras in hand, logging every vehicle that passed. I decided to play that game. I mounted trail cams along the fence line, motion activated, and set to capture every move they made. By the end of the week, I had gold footage of their guards littering on my property, trespassing beyond the fence, and in one case, relieving himself behind my barn. That little gem went straight to County Commissioner Jackson, who's not only a stickler for environmental regulations, but also my hunting buddy. He called me that night, laughing so hard he could barely talk. "Ezra, your HOA friends are racking up more violations than a frat party. Keep those cameras rolling." Meanwhile, Sarah wasn't just standing by. My wife has the quiet patience of a saint and the strategic mind of a general. She grew up helping her father research property disputes, and she could read deed records like a preacher reads scripture. One afternoon in the county clerk's office, under buzzing fluorescent lights and the smell of old paper, she struck gold. "Ezra," she whispered, tapping a faded federal document from 1967, "your granddad didn't just build this road. He used a federal agricultural improvement grant, and those grants, she smiled, they require open agricultural access forever. I pulled out my phone, ran the numbers on what it would cost to repay that grant after 40 years of interest, and whistled low. 340 grand, plus compounding. Sarah nodded. If she keeps that fence up, they could owe the feds nearly $500,000. But while we were quietly loading ammunition, Vivian was busy throwing everything she had at us. She sent a private investigator digging for dirt on my family, and came up with a single cattle runoff violation from 1995, 28 years old, paid and closed. She waved it at the next HOA meeting like she'd found the Watergate tapes. We'll report him to the EPA, she promised her crowd. I ran into her at the grocery store and, loud enough for half the town to hear, said, "Go ahead, Vivian." Statute of limitations expired when Clinton was still president. That night, Sarah got a call from an environmental lawyer she knew from veterinary conferences, a ranch kid turned litigator who specialized in agricultural rights. She offered to help pro bono after hearing our story. Within days, she'd found another weapon. The fence violated state wetland protection laws. Cottonwood Creek was classified as an intermittent waterway, and blocking its drainage was a big no-no. Vivian, desperate to hit me where it hurt, went after our property taxes. She convinced her golf buddy, the county assessor, to reclassify our ranch at commercial rates overnight. Our annual bill jumped from $4,200 to $18,500. Garrett appealed so fast it made their heads spin. The hearing revealed the assessor had never even visited the property. Another violation to add to our growing collection, but then Sarah uncovered the mother lode. Vivian wasn't just a lawyer. She was a disbarred lawyer. California had yanked her license in 2018 for embezzling $250,000 from an elderly client. Somehow, she'd wrangled a new bar number in Texas without disclosing her conviction to the HOA, which the law required. The next weekend, Sarah hosted what she called a ranch defense BBQ. 60 neighbors showed up. Old-timers shared stories about my grandfather building the road. Pete Morzan, 84 years old, brought a leather photo album with yellowed newspaper clippings from the road's dedication day. In one picture, my granddad was shaking hands with the county commissioner, a headline declaring, "New road connects community." Pete's voice trembled. "Your granddad said this road would serve the community for generations. Funny how they're trying to lock out the very family that built it." The mood shifted that night. People were starting to see the truth and some of Vivian's own. HOA members were getting nervous, especially when they learned her brother-in-law owned the fence company and the contract had never been competitively bid. Garrett leaned in over a plate of brisket and whispered, "She's not just wrong, Ezra. She's been breaking the law since day one." I could have gone in guns blazing right then, but ranchers know the value of patience. You don't pull a calf before it's ready, and you don't swing at an opponent until you've lined up the knockout blow. So I waited, documented every delivery delay, every injured animal, every penny this mess cost me. My grandfather used to say, "Measure twice, cut once." I was measuring until Vivian bled legal fees, and if she thought the worst was over, she hadn't seen anything yet. By late summer, the fight had turned into a chess game where every move cost someone thousands of dollars. The thing was, Vivian thought she was the only one playing. She didn't realize I'd stopped playing chess weeks ago, and started playing poker. The first crack came from inside her own camp. Garrett's paralegal, Lisa, called me one drizzly Thursday morning, her voice tight with excitement. "Mr. Thornfield, you need to get down here right now." When Sarah and I walked into Garrett's conference room, Lisa had documents spread out like she was piecing together a murder case. She pointed to a misfiled folder she'd dug up in county records. The original Willowbrook Development Agreement. Garrett scanned it, and for the first time in months, the man's poker face broke into a grin. "Holy hell. Listen to this. Developer agrees to maintain agricultural compatibility and shall not restrict existing agricultural operations as a condition of this permit." Sarah leaned in, eyes sharp. "Meaning what?" "Meaning," Garrett said slowly, "if they restrict your ranching, the county can revoke the occupancy permits for all 127 homes. The nuclear option, one clause, one violation, and the entire subdivision could be emptied out." But the smoking gun didn't stop there. Lisa had also found old county emails, ccd2vblackwood@dal.com, showing Vivian knew about this clause from day one. She'd been the developer's attorney. She had deliberately hidden it from her own HOA board. That was malpractice, fraud, and a breach of fiduciary duty all rolled into one. And just when I thought we'd hit peak leverage, Sarah's banking contact dropped another nugget. Vivian's mortgage was in default. Foreclosure in 90 days. An insurance fraud investigation had frozen her assets. Suddenly, her obsession with forcing me off my land made perfect sense. She wasn't fighting for community values. She was fighting for her own survival, but she was still dangerous. The next week, my security cameras caught movement near the fence line at midnight. Cattle bellowing woke me faster than any alarm clock. I grabbed a flashlight, pulled on boots, and ran. The beam caught a figure in dark clothes. Bolt cutters in hand, cutting my water lines. Sheriff Patterson was on site before dawn. "Ezra," he said grimly, holding up a bagged set of bolt cutters. Prince match, her driver's license renewal, destruction of property, agricultural terrorism. Under Texas law, endangering livestock isn't just vandalism, it's a felony. But Vivian didn't back off. Flyers started appearing around town claiming our ranch spread disease through contaminated water. The health department got anonymous reports about E. coli contamination. Sarah received a veterinary board complaint accusing her of unsanitary practices filed under a fake name, traced back to a Dallas phone number. The bank where I held my equipment loan called, suddenly demanding early repayment of $60,000. Later, I learned Vivian's brother-in-law worked in the loan servicing office. By Friday, someone had dumped dead fish in Cottonwood Creek and called the EPA, claiming livestock contamination was killing aquatic life. Problem was, they were saltwater fish, red snapper, and flounder, planted in a freshwater stream 40 miles from the Gulf. The young EPA inspector took one look and started laughing. Sir, whoever staged this just committed environmental fraud, federal offense. Even her legal Hail Mary backfired. She filed for an emergency restraining order to shut down my operations, claiming my cattle might escape and hurt school children. Judge Morrison, who used to run cattle himself, looked over the evidence and said flatly, "The only danger I see here is frivolous litigation." But behind the slapstick moments was real danger. Anonymous calls began mentioning my kids by name. That crossed the line. The FBI opened an interstate harassment investigation. Strange men in pickups started photographing my property from the road, license plates traced back to a Dallas security company on contract with concerned citizens. Vivian was cornered, and a cornered animal always bites the hardest. The mistake she made was thinking I'd bite back without thinking. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I was going to wait until the right moment and then make sure she never had the teeth to bite again. And that moment was coming, fast. Vivian's empire didn't collapse all at once. It started with hairline cracks. The kind you can't see until the whole wall shifts under its own weight. The first came from the county inspector, Rodriguez again, showing up unannounced. At Willowbrook, he wasn't there on my say-so. Someone else had filed a laundry list of violations. Unpermitted electrical work, improper fence installation, building code breaches. He slapped them with $25,000 in fines before lunch. 3H board members resigned that afternoon, their emergency meeting ending with a demand for an independent audit. The enemy of my enemy had just joined the fight, but the real breakthrough came from Garrett's paralegal. Lisa? She was like a bloodhound with a law degree. Once she caught a scent, she didn't let go. One rainy morning, she found something, buried in county records that shouldn't have been there. The original Willowbrook conditional use permit. We'd already seen the clause about agricultural compatibility, but this time, she dug up internal emails between the developer and county planning, CC'd to Vivian herself. Proof she'd known from day one she couldn't restrict my operations. Proof she'd lied to her own residents while the HOA against me. That's not just fraud, Garrett said, leaning back in his chair. That's legal malpractice, and it puts her personally on the hook for everything they've done. Meanwhile, Sarah's quiet network of friends was filling in the rest of the picture. Her banker contact confirmed the foreclosure timeline. 90 days until Vivian lost her McMansion. Her mortgage was underwater, her credit cards maxed, and her assets frozen in an insurance fraud investigation from a theft claim last year. Add to that the HOA's legal bills, over $40,000, and climbing, and she was running out of rope fast. But we weren't letting up. Garrett called it a legal multiplex strategy, hitting her from every angle at once. Federal complaint for violating agricultural grant terms, state complaint for wetland obstruction, county complaint for blocking an easement, and an internal HOA lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty. While the lawyers filed papers, Sarah went to work on hearts and minds. She organized Heritage Ranch tours every Saturday, inviting neighbors and school groups to see firsthand what sustainable ranching looked like. Kids got 2 pet calves and bottle-feed goats. Parents learned how rotational grazing improved water quality and soil health. 15 families signed our petition after seeing it with their own eyes. One woman told me, "We moved here for peace and fresh air." I didn't know our HOA was trying to destroy the reason we came. The momentum was shifting, and Vivian could feel it. Her response was pure desperation. She had someone, we never did figure out who, sneak onto my land in the middle of the night and cut the water lines to my cattle tanks. My security cameras caught them in infrared, bolt cutters glinting, shadow slipping back toward the fence. Sheriff Patterson bagged the cutters, ran the prints, and came back with confirmation. Matches her driver's license. Ezra, we're charging her with agricultural terrorism. Under Texas law, that's not just a fine. That's prison time. But if I thought that would scare her into backing down, I underestimated her pride. Within a week, the Millbrook Gazette ran an anonymous op-ed about dangerous, outdated agricultural practices in residential areas. Flyers popped up on telephone poles claiming our ranch spread disease. Sarah got a veterinary board complaint in the mail, full of fabricated accusations about unsanitary conditions. The FBI already looking into the interstate harassment, started seeing the pattern too. The same burner phone numbers showed up in multiple threats, all traced back to Dallas. By now, even some of her diehard supporters in the HOA were avoiding her calls. The new treasurer had discovered her brother-in-law's fence company had overcharged them by nearly 40%. There was no competitive bid, no receipts, just inflated invoices signed by Vivian. The walls were closing in. Garrett leaned over his desk one evening, eyes sharp. Ezra, she's hanging by a thread. One more pull, and this whole thing unravels. I looked out his office window toward the fading Texas sunset and thought about my grandfather's words. Measured twice, cut once. We'd been measuring for months. It was almost time to cut. Cornered animals don't think about escape routes. They think about taking as many people down with them as they can. Vivian was no different. It started with a whisper. Someone tipped me off that she'd been meeting with a commercial developer. Over in Dallas, Garrett dug deeper and found the smoking gun. Text messages from a disgruntled HOA member's phone showing Vivian promising to facilitate the sale of my ranch in exchange for a $50,000 consulting fee. She wasn't fighting for neighborhood integrity. She was trying to flip the entire area into a strip mall. Even the private investigator she'd hired to dig up dirt on me had switched sides. He'd been watching my family long enough to see the truth, and guilt must have eaten at him. He handed Garrett copies of every surveillance report he'd ever given Vivian. They showed weeks of fabricated incidents and cherry-picked photos meant to make us look like a hazard. Then came the environmental hammer. A professional survey confirmed the fence she built was blocking natural drainage, causing seasonal floodwater to redirect toward my property. The engineer's report was damning, creates flood hazard, violates state water law, potential EPA fines, $50,000 per day, until compliance restored. And that's when Garrett smiled, that slow, dangerous smile I've only seen twice before. Ezra, we don't even need to win in court. We just have to wait until her own finances collapse under this mess. The waiting didn't take long. By the time the HOA's next board meeting rolled around, the treasurer's audit was complete. It showed tens of thousands in miscellaneous expenses with no receipts, inflated fence contracts tied to her brother, and withdrawals that looked suspiciously personal. 3 days later, Rodriguez from County Planning was back at Willowbrook's gates, this time with a full enforcement team. They issued stop work orders on multiple HOA projects and handed Vivian $25,000 in new fines. None of it was my doing, it was her own neighbors, finally fed up, who'd reported her. The following week brought the midnight call that changed everything. The security cameras caught her. Dark hoodie, gloves, moving fast along the fence line. This time she wasn't cutting water, she was pouring something from a red gas can. Sheriff Patterson was on my porch at dawn, eyes grim. Ezra, she was talking to someone about burning the fence and blaming you for a fire hazard? That's conspiracy to commit arson. We've got it on audio. The arrest warrant went out that afternoon, but the FBI beat the sheriff to her door. It was 5:30. On a Wednesday morning when unmarked SUVs rolled into Willowbrook, half the subdivision watched from their windows as federal agents marched Vivian out in handcuffs, her silk robe hanging off one shoulder, hair wild. Evidence boxers went into vans. The neighborhood phones lit up like Christmas. By noon, the footage was trending online under hashtags like #HOA Karen and #Ranch Justice. National news ran headlines like Texas Rancher versus HOA, tyranny ends in FBI raid. Her financial house of cards collapsed faster than a barn in a tornado. The foreclosure auction for her home got exactly 0 bids. No one wanted a property tied to federal charges and neighborhood hatred. The bank took it back, then dropped the price below market, just to unload it. We joked about buying it as a guest house, but Sarah said the irony might kill her before the court case did. Meanwhile, the criminal file was growing by the hour. Wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, conspiracy or practicing law without a license, harassment, environmental fraud. The federal prosecutor made it clear they were going for 15 years. Minimum. By the time the dust settled, Vivian had gone from queen of the cul-de-sac to an inmate with a number. The new HOA board issued a public apology, offered to pay my attorney fees, and voted unanimously to remove the fence. The war was ending, but the victory lap had only just begun. The morning the fence came down, the air felt different. Cooler somehow, quieter. Even the cattle seemed to know something was about to change. The new HOA board, all 5 of them looking like they'd been through a tornado, stood awkwardly at the edge of my property. Martha Hendricks, the new president, clutched a manila envelope like it was a peace offering. Her hand shook when she passed it to me. Mr. Thornfield, on behalf of Willowbrook Estates, we're sorry, she said, voice catching. We lost sight of what this community was supposed to be. Inside was a formal apology letter signed by all 127 homeowners, a check for $275,000 in restitution, another for $100,000 in attorney fees, and a promise to fund $50,000 in educational programs on the ranch. I nodded, but I didn't say anything right away. My grandfather always said silence can weigh more than words, and in that moment, I think they felt every ounce of it. The official fence removal was scheduled for that afternoon, but Judge Williams insisted on a little ceremony first. He showed up with a battered old sledgehammer and a grin. "Ezra," he said, handing it over, "strike a blow for property rights and common sense." The crowd counted down from 10. When I swung, the steel rang out like a church bell. The post splintered, the crowd erupted, and someone in the back shouted, "Hell yeah," loud enough to rattle the roof. Sarah stepped forward next. Speaking with the calm precision of a veterinarian delivering a diagnosis, she laid out the impact: months of stress, lost business, injured animals, and the toll it took on our family. Miguel, my ranch hand, told the room about the back injury he suffered on the detour road, his voice steady but full of weight. Then came the moment that knocked the air out of me. Pete Morrison, 84 years old, shuffled up to the microphone holding that same worn photo album. His hands trembled as he opened to the yellowed newspaper clipping from 1962. My grandfather shaking hands with the county commissioner under the headline, "New Road Connects Community." "We built that road for all our neighbors," Pete said, his voice cracking. "Every load of gravel, every rock laid down, it was for the good of the community. And now, the community's giving it back to the family that made it." The applause was thunder. People stood, clapping until the walls shook. Even some of the Willowbrook folks who'd been cold to me for years were on their feet. That day wasn't just about tearing down a fence. It was about mending one. The good neighbor agreement we signed right there in front of everyone was simple. The ranch would provide agricultural education and emergency grazing land when needed. The HOA would maintain the road and respect agricultural operations. No more games. No more harassment. When I looked at Sarah, she was already smiling, that quiet smile she gets when she sees something coming together. The county voted on a new agricultural heritage protection resolution that same evening. Unanimous. It became law that no established agricultural operation in Millbrook County could be harassed or restricted by residential developments. In the back of the hall, high school FFA kids stood holding a conservation award for the ranch. One girl, barely 16, spoke into the microphone. "We're learning from this ranch what it means to protect something worth keeping." I'd spent months feeling like the last man standing in a storm. That night, it felt like the whole town was standing beside me. 6 months later, the road my grandfather built still runs straight and true through Cottonwood Creek. Only now it hums with something he could never have imagined. A smart gate system that protects privacy while ensuring every legitimate vehicle gets through without question. No more clipboards. No more permission slips to drive on our own land. Monthly reports show 40% less traffic thanks to improved alternate routes. And the shared cost with the HOA has upgraded our road beyond anything we could have done alone. For the first time in years, the dust settles slower in the summer, and the ruts don't swallow a pickup after a heavy rain. The ranch itself has transformed. Agricultural tourism has turned into a steady revenue stream. 200 visitors a month come for Heritage Ranch weekends, riding tours, cattle demonstrations, and farm-to-table dinners under the oak trees. The waiting list stretches months ahead. Henderson's, the restaurant downtown, now features our beef on their heritage menu. They say customers order it before they even see the specials. Turns out, authenticity tastes better than anything that comes wrapped in plastic at the grocery store. And the irony, Willowbrook property values jumped 8% after the dust settled. Families looking to escape city noise are drawn in by the idea of living next to a working ranch instead of another cookie-cutter subdivision. Even some of the folks who once supported Vivian now tell newcomers, best thing that ever happened to this place was making peace with the ranch. The legal victory didn't stop at our fence line. The federal court rulings in our case have been cited in other agricultural rights lawsuits. Lawyers across the country call it the Thornfield Standard, a precedent that says if an agricultural easement exists, it's untouchable, no matter how fancy the HOA stationery is. Texas A&M invited us to be a demonstration site for sustainable agricultural residential coexistence. Their students study how rotational grazing improves soil, how managed water flow keeps creeks healthy, and how an old ranch road can be the lifeline for an entire community. Sarah's veterinary practice has never been busier. The same neighbors who once filed noise complaints now call her for emergency visits. Our college kids, the ones who left wondering if they'd ever come back, return proud of the stand their parents took. Vivian, she's serving 18 months in federal prison, with 3 years probation and $850,000 in restitution. Her name is now a cautionary tale in legal ethics courses, held up as the example of what happens when suburban entitlement meets federal law. The Agricultural Heritage Education Foundation we started with the settlement money now funds scholarships for rural students studying agriculture, law, and environmental science. The first recipients, 3 local kids, told me they want to fight for the little guy when it's their turn. And every October, we host Heritage Day. People show up for cattle drives, barbecue, property rights, seminars, and local food vendors. It's become a $200,000 annual economic boost for Millbrook County, replacing the bad press with something worth celebrating. Standing out there at dawn, watching the mist rise over the pastures. I can still hear my grandfather's voice. Land's only as strong as the people who will stand for it. We stood, and we didn't just win. We built something that'll outlast every one of us. The fight started with a fence. It ended with a county resolution, a federal precedent, and a community that finally understood what my grandfather meant when he said, "This road will serve the people who belong here forever." I still walk it every evening. Same gravel he laid down in 1962, same line of oaks he planted along the bends. Some of them are taller than the old barn now, roots gripping the soil like they've claimed it for good. Sarah walks beside me, the dogs trailing close, cattle moving slow in the pasture. The stress lines that once lived between her eyes have faded. Her practice is thriving. The neighbors who once avoided her at the grocery store now stop to ask about the next ranch tour, or to drop off a pie just because. Our kids come home more often, not just for holidays. Our daughter is studying agricultural law now, says she wants to defend other families from the kind of fight we went through. Our son's finishing a degree in agricultural engineering, already talking about the improvements he'll make when it's his turn to run the place. The land itself has healed too. Cottonwood Creek runs clear, the drainage restored after the fence came down. Deer and wild turkey have returned to the low pasture. The wetland designation protects it from development, and the carbon program adds another stream of income to keep the ranch strong no matter what cattle prices do. Vivian's name doesn't come up much anymore, at least not in town, but in HOA training, seminars, and legal ethics courses. She's the cautionary tale. Don't be the next Blackwood, they say. And in Texas, that's about as close to immortality as you can get, just not the kind she wanted. Every October, during Heritage Day, I stand on the porch and watch the line of cars coming down Cottonwood Creek Road. Families, school buses, pickups with out-of-county plates. The air smells like mesquite smoke, and the sound of laughter carries across the pasture. That's when I know we didn't just win. We turned a fight into a future. The Agricultural Heritage Education Foundation is already paying for its first round of scholarships. Those kids, bright, determined, hungry to protect something worth saving, are the real legacy of all this. Long after I'm gone, they'll be standing for their land just like we did. And the irony, the HOA that once spent thousands trying to block my access, now partners with us on road maintenance and even sponsors some of our events. Turns out, working together costs less than fighting, in dollars and in pride. I think about my grandfather a lot these days. How he built this road without knowing what it would have to endure. How he believed that neighbors should share more than a fence line. They should share the responsibility of keeping the place alive. Sometimes, when the sun's low and the cattle are grazing slow, I'll stop in the middle of that road and listen. The wind through the oaks, the lowing of cattle, the quiet hum of a place at peace. We didn't just defend our rights. We proved that sometimes David still beats Goliath, especially when David has better lawyers, a community behind him, and a whole lot more to lose. So if you're listening to this wondering if you should fight, I'll tell you what my grandfather told me. Land's worth nothing if you won't stand on it. We stood, and we're still standing. The road's open again, just like he planned at *. You've heard this confession. Now wait until you hear the next one.